10,000 soldiers drown in seconds. But the survivor isn't running away. The coastal wetlands of California are underwater. A catastrophic flash flood has ripped through the marshlands, drowning millions of Argentine ants in a heartbeat. Among the debris, a single veteran scout climbs onto a floating piece of pine bark. Her nest is gone. Her queen is dead. But in the world of the Argentine ant, survival is not an individual choice. It is a biological command. She scans the turbulent water. The flood has erased all chemical trails, stripping away the invisible highways that held her empire together. Around her, thousands of displaced workers cling to floating twigs and living rafts. But they are not alone on this rising water. There is no time left. The midday sun beats down on the marsh, evaporating the water into a suffocating humidity. In minutes, the tide will surge again. The scout must find high ground before her bark raft disintegrates. She extends her antennae, tasting the air for alarm pheromones. What she detects is not the scent of her own kin. It is the signature of a rival Argentine ant super-colony from the southern hill. The flood has forced two mortal enemies onto the exact same refuge. The northern colony begins a desperate search against the clock. Workers lock legs, forming living chains to drag surviving sisters out of the current. They are guarding the next generation with their lives, clutching white pupae above the murky water. As they pull themselves onto the root of an ancient willow tree, the enemy strikes. What happens next changes everything. From the shadow of the willow root, a wave of dark bodies pours down. The southern colony has already established a foothold on the high ground. In the insect world, territory is absolute and trespassers are executed on sight. The scout freezes as a southern patrol cuts off her path. She is outnumbered and trapped against the rising tide. Yet she does not retreat. She raises her head and releases a distress signal into the wind. She has no idea what is tracking her scent from the deep water below. Within seconds, her signal connects. From floating debris, hundreds of northern survivors answer the call. They scramble across the mud to reach the willow root. The southern patrol moves to intercept, launching a full-scale invasion of the lower bark. Jaw meets jaw in a silent, violent clash. Argentine ants do not fight with stingers, they fight with mechanical precision. A northern veteran grabs a southern soldier, spraying a toxic defensive chemical into her joints. The southern soldier twitches and falls in the line of duty, swallowed by the swirling current below. She doesn't know the real threat is still coming. The battle lines blur as hundreds of bodies lock in lethal combat. The willow root becomes a vertical battlefield. The northern scout pushes forward, leading fresh workers into the enemy rank. They move as an army with overwhelming numbers, surging upward millimeter by millimeter. The vertical assault intensifies. Southern defenders swarm from above, hurling northern attackers into the churning water below. Every inch of bark is paid for in body parts and chemical burns. The scout climbs over fallen comrades, her legs covered in alarm secretions. By nightfall, the air cools rapidly. Argentine ants are cold-blooded. As temperatures drop, their movements stiffen. The window for victory is closing fast. The scout must break the southern line before the evening chill freezes her muscles. She spearheads a flank attack along a groove in the root. 4 northern workers lock jaws around a southern major ant, pulling until her exoskeleton snaps. Northern forces push deeper, forcing the southern Queen's Guard to retreat. But then, everything changes. A sudden groan echoes through the flooded forest. The willow tree, its roots weakened by torrential water, shifts with a deafening crack. A colossal decaying log detaches and crashes into the floodwaters. The impact sweeps hundreds of fighting ants into the river. The scout tumbles into the dark water, her mandibles barely catching the floating log. She pulls herself out of the foam and looks around. She has no idea how many enemies are waiting on the other side of the wood. The decaying log is now adrift in the middle of a vast brown lake. It is barely 15 feet long, isolated from the forest. Trapped upon this wooden raft are the remnants of both armies, 3,000 northern workers and 2,000 southern veterans. The conflict transforms. There is no soil to dig, no nest to defend. The war for land has become a fight for survival on a floating graveyard. A tense silence falls over the drifting log. Both forces regroup at opposite ends. In the center lies a small mound of trapped dead insects, the only food on the raft. So what do they do next? Hunger sets in rapidly. Starving workers groom themselves, clearing mud from sensory hairs. As the log drifts toward the open bay, waves splash over the sides, eroding the rotting wood beneath their feet. The southern queen sits at the far edge. If her dynasty ends in bloodshed here, her lineage vanishes from the coast forever. She releases a pheromone burst, ordering her remaining soldiers to take the food at all costs. The scout detects the signal instantly. She gathers her surviving sisters, forming a shield around their own queen. The two shattered armies prepare for a final clash on the rotting wood. The battle for the food mound begins with explosive savagery. Southern stormtroopers charge down the grain of the wood. The scout stands in the front rank, her mandibles wide. As the first enemy leaps, she strikes, biting through its leg joint. The log rocks violently on the open water. Waves crash across the bark, washing dozens of combatants into the abyss. Neither side backs down. Retreat is not in their genetic code. Every worker is an expandable asset, ready to make the ultimate sacrifice. The scout takes the brunt of the onslaught. Two attackers pin her antennae, trying to tear off her head. She fights back, spraying formic acid into their eyes. Northern reinforcements surge over them, trampling them into the wet timber. She doesn't know the real threat is still coming. The Northern Army gains the upper hand. Their numbers overwhelm the Southern defense line. Step by step, they drive Southern survivors back toward the narrow tip of the log. Southern major ants are torn apart one by one. The scout reaches the center and claims the food mound. Workers begin transporting dead beetles to feed their queen. Victory seems within reach. The northern colony has survived the flood, defeated their rivals, and secured the raft. She has no idea what is gathering beneath the surface of the tide. As the northern ants raise their mandibles in triumph, the wind shifts, howling across the marsh. The log has drifted past the protected channel and entered the mouth of the bay, where ocean tides meet the river current. The water here is no longer calm. Massive saltwater swells rise beneath the decaying wood, lifting the log like a matchstick. The rotting bark splinters under the relentless pounding of the waves. What happens next changes everything. A colossal tidal surge, a wall of saltwater 8 feet high, roars out of the mist. It hits the decaying log with terrifying force. The wood snaps into 3 pieces, shattering the Northern Army in a fraction of a second. Twist 2 strikes without warning. The ocean does not care about ant empires or bitter rivalries. Thousands of northern and southern soldiers are swept into the foaming sea. Their chemical signals are drowned out by salt. The scout clings to a tiny splinter of wood, no larger than an autumn leaf. Around her, the Great War has ended in total annihilation. The winning army, the losing army, the queens all swallowed by the sea. As the current pulls her splinter out toward the open Pacific, she looks back at the shrinking coastline. Her empire is dead, but her mandibles still hold a single viable pupa. The storm settles, leaving an eerie quiet over the Pacific. The raging tide that tore apart 2 rival super-colonies recedes, scattering fragments of wood across miles of coastal waters. Among the foam, the scout remains clinging to her splinter. Her body is battered, her limbs stiffened by salt, but her jaw remains locked onto the white pupa, the last vessel of her colony's future. Around her, the ocean surface is devoid of life. No alarm pheromones, no territorial markers. The Great War that cost thousands of lives has dissolved into the sea. In the world of super-colonies, individuals do not grieve. An ant possesses no concept of tragedy or defeat. She exists only as a single cell within a larger biological organism. When the organism dies, the surviving cell continues its pre-programmed mandate. Preserve the lineage at all costs. What happens next changes everything. As the current shifts toward the mainland, her drifting splinter is caught in an eddy. It glides past the outer breakers and washes ashore onto a quiet beach miles away from the flooded marshlands. The warm sand dries her wet exoskeleton, reawakening her dormant reflexes. Slowly, the scout flexes her tarsal claws. She steps onto the warm sand, placing the pupa on a dry pebble. Her antennae sweep the air, analyzing the environment. This beach is unpopulated, free from rival Argentine ants or native predators. She has no idea what is waiting in the sand dunes ahead. A few yards away, another piece of debris washes ashore. Out from beneath a piece of driftwood crawls a second survivor, a young virgin queen from her own colony, who survived the tidal surge inside a hollow knot of wood. The scout detects the chemical signature instantly. She scurries across the sand to meet the queen, tapping antennae in rapid recognition. The queen is unharmed, her abdomen heavy with unlaid eggs. On this empty coast, the dynasty wiped out in the marsh finds its second breath. Together, the scout and queen begin to dig. Their mandibles scoop away grains of sand, constructing a subterranean chamber. They work without pause against the clock, laying down fresh chemical trails for future generations. She doesn't know how far this new empire will spread. Within weeks, the first generation of new workers will emerge from their pupae. They will forage across the dunes, expand underground tunnels, and establish new outposts along the coast. The bloodbath in the marshlands was not the end of the war. It was merely a reset in an endless struggle.